You need to know, with regard to the recording, I'm a little jinxed, because about half of the things that have ever been recorded, something has happened to the recording, so there's funny noises on it, or it didn't record, or it's lost. So we're going
doing two recordings in two different languages, and we're backing it up every
Wonderful. So actually, one of the things about Al-Anon is, or S-Anon, any of the Anon programs, the organisation tends to be a little better than when you leave the addicts to do it. The addicts are more concerned about who is going to get the glory for doing the recording, but no one does the recording. One of the difficulties I have had over the years with the fact that I have problems which are solved by different fellowships is that I have been tempted to have my AA program here, my Al-Anon program here, my Coda program here, all of these different programs which then seem to conflict with each other, argue with each other, different methods, different lists, different inventories, and I'm not going to tell anyone how to do their recovery, but I will tell you how I, having found a path through this wonderful range of fellowships. I use the structure of the Step 4 in the big book, but I incorporate a lot of material from Al-Anon. So the structure is AA, but the content is AA and Al-Anon, and some other things I have learnt along the way. Can I ask, before we get into the Step 4, how many of you have done a Step 4? Good, so about just over half. And how many of you used the big book for that? And can I ask you, what other methods have people used?
S-Anon book.
Okay.
NA's booklet is how S-Anon Israel started.
Okay. So, I'm not saying that one method is better than another. I'm just telling you the one that I use. So if that's useful, wonderful. If you do inventory another way, and that works for you, don't mess with it. It's fine. But the inventory in the big book in AA, there are 3 obvious inventories, and then there is a secret inventory. The first inventory is the resentment inventory, the second is fear, the third is sexual relationships, intimate relationships, and the fourth is the harms list. The reason I say it's a secret one is because as you do your Step 4 in the big book, you do write the harms, but they're written in different places. The harms to others are buried in a lot of other information. But on page 76, in Step 8, it says, we have a list of harms, of people we have harmed. We made it when we took Step 4. So it implies there's a little bit of tidying up of the harms from Step 4 to produce the Step 8 list. Now the resentment inventory, resentment in modern British English is not a word that people really use. It's very unusual. There are lots of words that I wouldn't say in front of delicate people, some of whom may be present, but we don't use the word resentment. It's reserved for very long-standing forms of low-level hatred. Now we have that, but we often call it something else. But the resentment inventory is really an inventory based on everything that bothers me. It's any emotional disturbance. When I'm feeling anything but peace. Now I can be in pain and at peace. That's fine. So when my father died, I was in pain, but I was at peace. When I was 8 years in AA, I was very ill. I didn't know if I was going to die. I was in huge physical pain, but I was at times at peace. So it's not an inventory of pain, it's an inventory of emotional disturbance, but most pain is accompanied by disturbance. It's unusual to be in pain and at peace. That is a skill which is acquired very slowly. So really the step 4 resentment inventory is really, its starting point is, where am I upset? Where am I disturbed? And the words it uses in English to access those feelings, because you've got to start with the feelings. The words are, number 1, resentment, angry, hurt, threatened, sore. This is going to stretch the... I can't remember, I don't know what it says in the Hebrew. Sore or burned up, grudge, injury, or where we had been interfered with, where something in the world is interfering with our lives. And a friend of mine in AA says also, write about all of the people you feel superior towards. This is a covert, a sort of hidden form of disturbance. It's a way of separating yourself from whole categories of people. And then we get into the interesting bit, which is why these people disturb us. So the first column is the people. The second column is what happened. Now, we've got to be careful that it is what happened and not my interpretation of what happened. I received an email from a client. I work for agencies. They send me work. My work then goes to the agencies, and within the agency they will check and proofread and review the work, and then the work goes to the end client. And I asked a couple of questions to this agency, and the question went all the way up the chain to the most senior person. And this senior person sent me an email back, and she copied everyone else in the agency on the email. A couple of you already know where this is going. And what happened was I had this immense emotional reaction to it, because I felt that she was replying in such a way as to humiliate me or put me down in front of all of these other people, and assert her authority over me. So she was more experienced, she was clever, all of these things. And the way she did it was to say that, to imply that I was stupid for even asking these questions, and the answers were so obvious that she made it seem ridiculous that I was even asking. And I had to be careful when doing inventory on this, in the second column, to say just what happened. So what happened was a woman at an agency, column 1. Column 2, wrote an email, copied to other people, giving an answer which involved distortion or humour or something. It wasn't a straight answer, it was a twisted answer. There was exaggeration in the answer. That's all that happened. Someone wrote an email to some people in which there was exaggeration. So I've taken my interpretation out of it and realised, oh my God, just from this second column, I've got a huge emotional reaction that she's humiliating me, she's putting me down, she's making me look stupid. No, the event is this person is expressing herself with exaggeration and with humour and with some other things. So when I'm going through this with sponsees, their first attempt at the second column has got speculation going on. So I didn't react to it. I didn't react to the event. I reacted to what I thought she was trying to do. I went behind the event to what was going on in her mind. And I've had so many conversations with people in which I say, do you have a certificate for mind reading? Where did you qualify as a mind reader? And people find it so difficult when I say, are you a mind reader, to give a clear answer, no. Almost everyone thinks they have this special skill. Now sometimes you're a little bit right, but I know from how often people think they can read my mind, I know the gap between what people think and what is really going on. So I know that's true the other way. So I get to strip out the speculation and just leave the fact, and strip out the interpretation. She didn't humiliate me. She wrote an email and copied some other people. That she humiliated me, that would be an effect in the mind of the reader. I don't know what the other people in the agency thought or felt when reading this. Humiliation is not the event, it's what I think is going on in other people's minds. Again, it's interpretation. Someone phoned me to go through some step 4 a couple of years ago, and she said, second column, my boss always criticises me. And I said, always? Is every single thing she says a criticism? Well, no. How many times a day does she speak to you? Maybe 50. How many times a day does she criticise you? She said, maybe twice a week. This is not always.
Criticism is also her. She said it's criticism. It's also her, my
interpretation. Yeah, I mean, in this case, what the what the boss was doing, it's interesting you say that, is because what the boss was doing was disagreeing with her in a meeting. So it wasn't even a direct criticism. It turns out it was simply expressing a different point of view. I've written and I've had people write in step 4, second column, so and so, this person did not respect me. And you'd think, well, that's a terrible thing. We all want to be respected. Oh, that's sad. Not to be respected. We all deserve respect. If you dig a little, you discover the event was this person did not obey me. This person believes something different than me. This person disagrees with me. That is the fact. And I tell you, 19 out of 20 emotional disturbances drop at this point in the second column. When I stop speculating, I stop interpreting, I stop generalizing, this happened once, therefore they think this the whole time. Maybe, maybe not. And I stop personalizing. If I can get to the facts, very often I think, nothing has happened here. Anyway, but with some things, I'm still disturbed. And what the big book asks me to do is to say which area of me, of my life, is being affected. And there are 7 areas. The first area is called pride. And pride is where I'm worried about what you think about me. The image I think you have of me. The picture in your mind of me. Self-esteem is where I'm worried about my own image of myself. You think you're great at your job, a criticism comes in, and you think, oh, I'm actually terrible at this. Your image of yourself has changed. Personal relations and sex relations, that's where I'm bothered because of what you are doing to me. Maybe directly, maybe indirectly. If it's in the intimate relationship, sex relations. If it's any other relationship, personal relations. And then we have 3 more areas, which are ambitions, which is what I want, security, which is what I need, and the big book uses this old term pocketbooks, which means purses or wallets, but that's really finance. So we now have 7 areas. And pride, self-esteem, personal relations, sex relations, ambitions, security, and pocketbooks. Finances is the last one. And now, here is the amazing thing that I learnt in AA. The reason I'm disturbed is not because of what you have done or because of what has happened. I have compared what I think happened to a secret plan somewhere in my mind. I don't know the plan is there until something fails to follow the plan. And it's like having a field with landmines where I don't know where the landmines are, except when you step on one of the landmines, I blow up. And so it looks like you're causing all of this, but I'm the one that put the landmines there. And those landmines are, the book calls it little plans and designs. So playing God, God is supposed to be the one with the plans. My problem is that I play God and I have plans and designs. I have demands, I have expectations. So I've got to find out what the plans and designs, what the demands and expectations are, in order not to be disturbed when something happens outside of me. So in this small resentment against the agency, which took 2 days for me to get over, it was so embarrassing. I was more embarrassed by my emotional disturbance than I was by the I showed the email to a friend in AA who is sober 4 years a couple of days later, and he said, it's not that bad. It's really, I mean, it's a bit off, but really it's fine. And I'd spent the whole day thinking, I'm not going to work for this agency anymore, I'm going to put up a boundary, I'm not. And it was nothing. But the demands, pride, I want them to see me as the best worker. Self-esteem, if I were more perfect, no one could ever criticize me. Personal relations, if you're going to communicate, don't exaggerate, don't twist, don't distort, say it straight, don't involve emotion, don't involve manipulation. I had this whole script for how this woman was supposed to communicate. No sex relations there. Ambitions. I want to be seen by them as the best worker amongst all of these. Because I want more work, I want more position, I want better work from them. And if they think I'm not as good, the work I get will not be as good. I will be lower down the system. Security. A lot of my money comes from this agency. So if they think there's something wrong with me, there's a real problem. Now the truth is they have offered me dozens of jobs since this event, and I can't take all the jobs because I have enough work already. There is not even a problem here. But to be comfortable, I needed to get rid of those demands. And this is how to get rid of resentment. So the first,
So you need to get rid of the demands.
the emotional disturbance is arising because the demands are not met. So yes, my demands. So to get rid of the emotional disturbance, I need to get rid of the demands. And there are 4 ways to get rid of demands.
Do you answer those questions to yourself? The pride, you fill out where
Yes.
you describe it?
Yes. So with those 7 areas, in the big book, it simply says which area is affected. Pride, self-esteem, and the rest. But at the bottom of the page, it says, when we completed the list, we considered it carefully. So I consider it carefully and write down the consideration. So why? It's a simple question. Also on page 67, it says, where were we self-seeking? And the self-seeking on page 67 is the demand. So I'm seeking something in the area of pride. I'm seeking for you to think a particular way of me. I'm seeking in self-seeking, in self-esteem. I have this image I want to have of me. I give you a script in personal relations. All of these are forms of self-seeking. So I bring that self-seeking stuff to really understand why these things are being affected. Otherwise, I just remain a victim of these things, and I don't just want to be a victim. I need to find how I am creating this disturbance. So there are 4 ways. Oh yes, question. No, English, please.
I can translate.
Okay.
How can I, how shall I write the difference between demands and normal or legitimate needs?
Yeah. So okay. So a demand is where I command that something be a certain way. So like when the city authority sent out an order to say there are no bonfires on Lag BaOmer, that is a demand. That is a command. And I take my demands that I get out of my step 4 and I do one of 4 things with them. Some demands are just nuts. For instance, my demand, I'm a translator by profession. Hebrew is not one of the languages, I hasten to add. But the ego demand is that I be seen as the best translator that works for this agency. Now that's just crazy. Why should I be the best translator? That is a demand I can just drop. There is no value to the demand. There's no sanity to the demand. Those just have to go. The second demand is, second type of demand is where I turn the volume down from a demand and turn it into a preference. The way I did that with my other half has a very high level job in charge of the sexual health of the whole of London, plus public health for 2 parts of London. So sometimes when my other half comes home, he is available emotionally. Sometimes he's not. He's been shouted at all day. People have been horrible. He just needs to sit there quietly and say nothing. I would prefer attention, but I'm not going to demand attention. I prefer, when I go to a restaurant, I prefer a certain dish. If they have the dish, marvellous. If they don't, I'll eat what they have. You know, when you go to a friend's house and whatever they cook is fine by you, and yet if a restaurant had the same dish, you would not eat it, but at a friend's house you would. So the second type of demand, you change it from a demand to a preference, so you're then fine when the demand is not met. The third type of demand, sometimes you can take steps to make it happen. So when this trip was arranged 5 or 6 weeks ago, whenever it was, as you know, it was 2 months ago the trip was arranged. I started to get disturbed, so I thought, I don't know any modern Hebrew. I know 3 words in modern Hebrew. I'm going to a country where I was emotionally disturbed. So I thought, I'm going to have to do something about this. So I get the books, I get the tapes, blah, 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 and I learn some Hebrew. So rather than just being upset about the demand, do something about it. So that's your legitimate demands. If I'm upset that I never have any money, maybe I'm going to have to budget maybe I'm going to have to work harder, maybe I'm going to have to stop spending money on rubbish, and then I will have some more money. So there are some things which are within my power to change. So I go from being a victim to being an active participant. Now, almost everything is either rubbish and I can drop it, or I turn the volume down from a demand to a preference, or I can work for it. Sometimes working for it is setting a boundary of some sort. For instance, with certain people, the boundary is, I don't like it when people shout. So I tell them, if you shout, I'm putting the phone down. If you want a conversation with me, it is without shouting. So those are your legitimate demands. If someone shouts, I have a way of handling it. The fourth type is where it just sucks. So some things are just sad.
You mean you keep the demand? That's what you're saying. You let the demand stay and you just feel pain and it's not coming.
Some demands, when people die, when people get sick, the demand is don't be sick, don't die. You can't remove the demand from your programming. When you're physically hungry or physically in pain, you can't tell yourself, stop feeling hungry. It doesn't work. You can't remove the programming. But you can do three things. The first thing, I know everything is always in lists. I have whole departments of people in my head who are in charge of list making. The first thing is to develop gratitude. So there are lots of people in my family who died many years before they should have died. Siblings. So rather than being resentful that my brother is dead, to be grateful for the ones who are alive. Most of the people in my family are not available emotionally for a relationship of any sort. There is surface interaction, but there's no one there. With my mother, she is there a little. There is a lot that is blocked that I can't get to. But I'm grateful for what is there. I'm grateful for the life that there is. Part of my Al-Anon program, I have 3 pot plants at home, which all look pot plants.
Is there water?
Yeah.
No, potted plant.
Sorry, I've been out these rooms too long.
I have 3 potted plants at home. And they look terrible. They're all the wrong shape. There are strange dead parts. I wanted to get rid of them. And my other half said, they're still alive. Why are you trying to kill what is alive? They look awful. But they're still alive, so we're keeping them. This is active gratitude. You are grateful for the organs that do work. And you don't worry about the organ that doesn't work. The second one is humility. The opposite of humility is entitlement. And entitlement is, there is an English fairy tale, I don't know if it exists in other languages, about a princess who sleeps on on 100 mattresses and there is a single pea under the bottom mattress and she can feel the pea. This is entitlement, the idea that I should go through life, nothing bad should ever happen to me. Why? Because the rules that apply to you do not apply to me. So if I'm going to have the human experience, I need the humility to recognize that everything that is part of that could happen to me. And the third antidote to those things which are just horrible is courage, which is the strength to remain useful, cheerful, and kind, whatever happens. No complaining. Useful, cheerful, and kind. And you might be the only person in the situation trying to be useful, cheerful, and kind. And then, so this is how to deal with the demands. That takes me 95% of the way towards getting rid of resentment. There is a remaining 5%, which is prayers at the top of page 67.
You mentioned that you take the demands and you do one of the following 4 things with it. It would seem to me that sometimes you do a combination.
Yes. Yes.
Like you try to take steps, but it still sucks.
Yeah. The prayers.
Hold on, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The columns.
Yes.
We just did the person,
yes.
what happened, and then the 7. And we do a lot of writing with the 7. Is that right? Like
a little bit.
We write a sentence of what our expectations of pride. And then the 4th column of my mistakes.
We haven't come to that.
Oh.
Yeah. We're still working on how to get rid of the resentment.
The prayers are in the 3rd column.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So 66, 67 is where this is considering it carefully, considering the demands which are behind the disturbance, and then saying the prayers on 67, the most important one for me, God, show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view.
Sorry, if you with the demands, if you're just really not sure what version of demands, essentially what would you do? Like you're not sure if it's something that's semi-legitimate or what, you don't know where it sits at all.
Ask a happy person. The 4th column of the resentment inventory. May I just ask, can I run over this session 5 minutes or so to finish the step 4 in one go, so we're not splitting it? There are some questions on page 67 which are all really asking the same thing from a different angle. If you walk around a statue, you will see the same arms and legs from different angles, but it's the same arms and legs. So the questions, what am I frightened of? Where am I self-seeking? Where am I selfish? It's really coming at the truth of how I have been acting and thinking and believing in this situation. And my character defects, this is where I get my character defects, so where I'm wrong. And I'm looking for 3 types of thing. First of all, beliefs. An example of a belief. To be okay, I need to be the best. It's an old belief. And then defects of thinking and defects of behaviour. Now, where does Al-Anon literature or other Anon literature come into this? Let me just... The way I use Al-Anon books is I will read maybe a page or two a day, and I will note down any line, and I'll copy it into another book, any line which tells me what I'm doing wrong in a particular situation, where my belief is wrong, where my thinking is wrong, where my behaviour is wrong, and then I will look out for a solution, an altered attitude. So I've got my notes here from Discovering Choices, which is one of my favourite Al-Anon books. And it's very hard for me if you say to me, how are you being selfish here? What is your mistake here? I'm like, I have no idea. But you give me a list and I can go, oh, yes, that's the thing that I am doing. And some of these lists, you can use them both ways. You can use the list to tell you what not to do and to tell you what to do. And I talked about defects of thinking. I've got a little list from Discovering Choices of where my thinking is sometimes wrong. And this is what then goes onto my inventory. I go down the list and say, well, what am I doing? And I love this one. The defect. Trying to figure out why other people are the way they are. I don't need to find a formal name from a prayer book for a defect. I just say it how it is. Trying to figure out why people are the way they are. Fantasizing that people should be perfect. I find it much easier to identify an actual thinking pattern than to give it an abstract name of pride or jealousy or envy. Mental chatter about other people's actions. That's a defect of thought. Chatter, 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 chatter. About what? About you. So I get very concrete in this fourth column. So the structure I get from the big book. What were my mistakes? The content I take from the Al-Anon literature. The Al-Anon literature is mostly in the form of stories and sharing. So I need to work actively with that to extract what are the defects. And the literature is very, very rich. The rest of the inventories are very, very similar. I'm going to say one thing about the fear inventory, one thing about the sex inventory. The fear inventory, you list the fears, all the things you're frightened of, and then you ask yourself one question. I'll go to page 68. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? And what that means practically is for me to look at the situation and say, I was depending on my plans to give me security, not depending on God saying, my spirit is safe. Whatever happens, even if I die, my spirit is safe. That's what relying on God means to me. If I can only be okay if I remain in this physical form, I will spend the rest of my life terrified. There's no way around it. Very simple. As soon as you're happy with dying, everything else is an extra. I know, wide eyes, but there we go. I can't change the truth. And the sex inventory, it's got some specific questions, but honestly, it's very similar to the fourth column of the resentment inventory. It's just with a magnifying glass. That's all. I'm going to leave discussion. It's all out of sequence now. There's going to be less time for later steps. I'll do my best. But let's have a 10-minute break and then we'll do the rest of the steps. Okay?